Mystic and Magic, a Royal Cornwall Museum exhibition. Allantide. Allantide is a festival observed in Cornwall on the 31st of October. Considered by many as a version of Halloween, the festival focuses on the apple. Allan markets would be held beforehand, selling large sweet red apples, which were known as Allan apples and gifted to family members to bring good luck. The apples were to be eaten, though children also placed them under their pillow for good fortune, or in some cases to encourage dreams of their future spouse. The festival is thought to have associations with the Cornish or Breton Saint Allan. St Allan, a 6th century bishop of Camper, was celebrated on St Allan's Day, or the Feast of St Allan. It is closely related to the Welsh Hollantide and Irish Samhain festivals. All of these celebrate the harvest and the closing of the year into darker days. As such, there are traditions of divination, mischief, ghosts, bonfires, magic, and superstition. Like many traditions connected to Halloween, the coming of winter was associated with death. During the Allantide celebrations, the church bells were tolled to aid the passage of the spirits. The night of Allantide was used in a variety of ways to define answers for questions about love. Apples are a symbol of love, fertility, and harvest in many cultures, perhaps because apples require at least 2 trees to pollinate. Single people would throw molten metal into cold water. The shape of the metal was used to define a future lover. The symbol would show the job they might have, such as a fish indicating a fisherman. Walnuts were tossed into the fire by married couples on the night of Allantide to ensure fidelity for the year. Records show that some Allantide traditions were still being carried out in St Ives, Newlyn and Penzance up until the turn of the 19th century. Object 1. Witch Ball. A glass witch ball, silvered green and 11 centimetres in diameter, with a metal ornamented tap and hanging ring. There is a ragged piece of twine hanging from the ring, which would have been used to dangle this from a ceiling or beam. The object is quite large and would have to be held in 2 hands. It closely resembles a Christmas bauble. There are 10 witch balls in the collections of the RIC, this being one of the largest. Witch balls can range in size from about 3 centimetres to 18 centimetres in diameter, and in a range of colours, though many are simply silver. Nelsey glassmakers manufactured witch balls from the late 18th century. The balls were to be suspended in a window, chimney, or a dark corner, where they would reflect away evil spirits and bad luck. They resemble glass fishermen's floats. It is believed that the association with witches grew after the witch trials, where the accused would be put into water to determine if they were a witch or not. If they floated, then they were considered guilty. Likewise, the balls float in the water. Object 2. Cauldron Table Ornament. A silver-plated ornamental stand in the form of a long-eared owl atop the branch of a tree from which is suspended a detachable cauldron. A mushroom-shaped fuel burner is in the base. The branch stretches upwards and veers off to one side. It is very knobbly and has been inscribed with a texture of bark. The owl has a loop from its beak and stands quite tall atop the branch. At the base of the branch are ferns and flowers, also made from the same silver plate. The cauldron hangs from the outstretched branch down to hang just above the mushroom, in which would have been placed fuel to heat the contents of the cauldron. The cauldron itself is quite large, about 11 centimetres in diameter. This ornament was presented to Miss C. M. Tremaine. Inscription on the cauldron reads, "On her marriage from her friends employed at Carclew, January 1883. In Cornwall, the owl was considered a symbol for the witch or her familiar, while the cauldron was her vessel for mixing potions. Cauldrons would be hung over the hearth and used to boil water and cook food. Together, the cauldron and fire were considered symbols of the home for many centuries, with the hearth being the central element of the household that brought hot food and warmth to the inhabitants. The connection between symbols of the witch and symbols for the home is very powerful, and shows how fine was the line between witch and homemaker during the witch trials. Object 3. Tarot cards. A set of 78 block-printed and coloured Tarot de Marseille cards, likely a late 19th century reproduction of the 1760 edition. In this example, we have several cards laid face up, with the figures and images facing the user. The cards are very brightly coloured. They have been hand-inked using blue, red and yellow and green. Tarot cards were used from around the mid-15th century and originally used to play tarocchini or tarot games, a sort of complex game of trumps. The cards started to be used for divination in the late 18th century after it was misunderstood that they originated from the ancient Egyptian Book of Thoth. They are divided into the Major Arcana and the Minor Arcana. The Major Arcana has 22 cards without suits, which represent key aspects and themes of life. The Minor Arcana resembles a deck of playing cards with 4 suits: coins, cups, batons and swords, diamonds, hearts, clubs and spades respectively, numbering 1 to 10 with court cards, page, knight, queen and king. Object 4. Fortune chart. The physio-psychophone or talking board. This chart is a square piece of waxed paper in the centre with the title written in a circle around some symbols. In one corner there are some symbols, in another corner there are letters of the alphabet, in another corner is written some words of advice and the same in the opposite. In the sections in between these corners are written common phrases and idioms intended to be advice given by the spirits. The talking board dates from the late 19th, early 20th century and was manufactured in Britain. This chart would have come boxed with a planchette, a triangular wooden board with a hole at one angle for reading letters through, and used as a fortune-telling game. Unlike a Ouija board, this chart was used to predict the future or for advice. Some believe that the spirits can talk through these boards, but in fact it is a simple paper sheet printed with common expressions. Object 5. Ivory netsuke. An ivory Japanese netsuke depicting a woman carving a large pumpkin. The woman sits on the ground and holds what looks like an axe into the side of the pumpkin, which stands taller than her. She looks gleefully out to the viewer. The pumpkin has 2 leaves with a trailing vine down the side. Netsuke were used as a decorative toggle to secure items to Japanese dress. Here we see an example of one of our favourite autumn symbols, the pumpkin. In Cornwall, like Ireland, the turnip was often carved and left out to guide the spirits home, and was considered a symbol of harvest. After the colonisation of North America, where squashes were native, the pumpkin took on this role. It was brought back to Europe and Asia in the 16th century, where, due to its high nutritional value, it became a staple of autumn and winter diet. Pumpkin carving is now popular around the world. Object 6. Witch bottle. This witch bottle is a crudely made Bellarmine-style jug. This means that it has a slim but tapered lip, which goes down into a very wide hip and then tapers down to the base. A witch bottle and several fragments of pottery were found in the hearth of Mee Hall Mill farmhouse, St. Kevin, while removing the cob within the walls of the house. The intact pot was emptied by the finder's wife. However, one fragment of another jug found with this intact pot contained small, flat-top tacks which had been hammered into the bottom of the pot, and a thick deposit of bitumen on its inner surface, containing hair, pins, and possibly grass. Witch bottles were thought to protect against ill wishes, often using the hair or urine of the victim, grass and plants, and nails or tacks. The bottle was then sealed and hidden or built into the home of the victim. Witch bottles have been found in Padstow, Trevone, Morwenstow, as well as the Lizard example here, and likely others across Cornwall and the rest of the country. Superstition. Superstition persisted in Cornwall until very recent times, with belief in evil witches recorded into the early 20th century. Even during the 19th century, trials were held against witches and ill wishers, for whom thankfully the penalty was usually nothing worse than a fine at this time. Plants. Brambles and thorny plants, such as hawthorn and blackthorn, were used to cure ailments in Cornwall. The plants were often passed over the affected areas 7 times in the hope of a cure. Around Halloween time, the Cornish festival of Allantide included many plant superstitions used to divine answers for questions about love. For more about this, please listen to the entry on Allantide. Animals. In Cornwall, animals are heavily featured in superstition. Sailors and fishermen were known to refuse to go out to sea if they had seen a white rabbit or hare, or even if someone had mentioned it. At the same time, rabbits are symbols of good luck in many cultures around the world. Owls, rabbits or hares, toads, frogs and cats are all said to be the witch's familiar, or even her animal form. Toads and frogs were also used as a folk cure for warts and other ailments. Object 7. A 20th century napkin ring in the shape of a rabbit given as a christening gift. The body of the rabbit forms the ring. Its 2 front paws stick out of the front, while its 2 rear paws act as the base. Its tail sticks out from the back. Its head sits atop, with one ear cocked, and one ear lying flat. The inside of the ears are a bright green, and its eyes are the same green. The rest of the rabbit is brown. The rabbit symbolises new life, spring and luck, but it could also be viewed as a bad omen depending on the situation. Object 8. Toad netsuke. A wooden Japanese hinoki netsuke in the shape of a toad. The craftsman has captured the lumps and bumps of the toad perfectly. Perhaps this is the reason it was thought to cure warts. The toad is made from cypress wood and is a medium brown and highly polished. Cornish fairies and small folk. Piskeys. Piskeys, known as pixies in much of Britain, are small fairy-like creatures in Cornish folklore. They were often seen as perpetrators of mischief, though on occasion they brought good luck. To annoy a piskey was considered a terrible mistake and often ended in misfortune. Piskeys were attributed to the stone circles found across Cornwall, mysterious music that had caused people to spontaneously dance, the finding of mines, and of whisking people away. 2 famous Cornish women who communed with the fairies were Agnes Martin and Anne Jeffreys. Agnes went missing for several years and claimed to have been taken by the small people. Anne Jeffreys was thought to have a connection with fairies. Anne was then imprisoned by the notorious magistrate Teagle, himself thought to have made a pact with the devil, having heard of her strange clairvoyant abilities. Knockers. Knockers, like piskies, were fairy-like creatures that lived in the mines. Depicted as tiny men, knockers were thought to foreshadow the collapsing of a mineshaft by knocking on the walls of the mine. In fact, this was the creaking of the earth and timber before a collapse. Some miners felt that they were spiteful, intending harm, while others thought that they sought to warn the miners of impending danger. The tradition of throwing the crust of the pasty to the knockers not only saved the workers from eating the poisonous arsenic that their fingers left on the pastry, but was also a superstition thought to appease the little men. This exhibition was brought to you by the Royal Cornwall Museum in Truro. It was researched using material in the Courtney Library, housed within the Royal Cornwall Museum building. We'd like to give special thanks to Hayley Bennett, a volunteer with the Royal Cornwall Museum, who photographed the objects 1 to 5. This is the end of your audio digital exhibition. Thank you for listening.